Night fell quickly. The fields outside lit up with moving beams of cold white light. Shadows shifted between the cornstalks, figures tall and thin, walking with precision. They made no sound, but the air hummed faintly, an unnatural vibration that set Eli's teeth on edge. Lyra pressed close to him, trembling. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They found me. They will not stop. If you give me to them, they may leave you." Eli turned sharply. "Is that what you want? For me to just hand you over?" Her eyes filled with tears, glowing faintly in the dark. "I want you to live. They will kill you if you resist." He stared at her. She was serious. She truly believed he would betray her to save himself. Eli's jaw tightened. "Listen to me. You came here. You asked me not to kill you, and I swore I wouldn't. Do you think I'll break that now?" Lyra opened her mouth, but no words came. She looked at him, lost, as if she couldn't understand the kind of promise he was making. Searchers drew closer. Through the cracks in the window, Eli saw their shapes, taller than men, armored in something that shimmered like glass. Their heads were smooth, featureless, glowing faintly with lines of light. In their hands, they carried weapons that pulsed with energy, humming louder the nearer they came. Eli's heart pounded. He had fought no one in years, not since the bar fights of his youth. He was only one man with an old shotgun. But in that moment he felt the same anger that had burned in him as a boy when he saw his sister cower from their father. The same fury at cruelty, at helplessness. He would not let them take her. He set Lyra behind the kitchen counter. "Stay down. Don't move unless I tell you." She gripped his arm desperately. "Eli, they will kill you. Then they'll..." No, they had to fight for it. He growled, pulling free. The knock never came. Instead, the front door simply glowed, the wood dissolving, eaten away by some strange light. Figures stepped through the threshold as if it wasn't there. Eli fired. The shotgun roared, the sound deafening inside the farmhouse. One of the figures staggered back, its glassy armor cracked, sparks spilling from its chest. The others turned instantly, their weapons blazing with white fire. Bolts of energy ripped through the room, burning holes in the walls. Eli ducked, fired again, then again, each shot fueled not by skill but by raw determination. He shouted, a sound torn from deep inside, louder than the storm had ever been. Lyra cried out from behind the counter, her hands pressed to her head, as though the very sound of the weapons tore through her bones. The farmhouse shook with violence. Wood splintered, glass shattered, smoke filled the air. Eli's lungs burned, his arms ached, but he did not stop. He was one man standing against a world that had decided she didn't deserve to live, and he would not yield. By the time silence fell, the house was wrecked. The hunters lay scattered, their glowing armor dimming, retreating into the night with eerie, inhuman cries. Eli dropped to his knees, chest heaving, blood running from a wound across his side. His shotgun slipped from his hands, empty, useless. Now Lyra crawled to him, tears streaking her glowing face. She pressed her hands against his wound, light flaring from her palms. "No," she whispered, desperate. "Stay, please stay." Eli's vision blurred, but he saw her, saw the terror, the grief, the hope in her eyes. And for the first time, he realized something. He was no longer fighting just to protect her. He was fighting because she had given him a reason to live. Eli Turner had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a farmer, a tired man living in a quiet house. Yet that night, as smoke choked the air and his shotgun lay empty on the floor, he realized heroes weren't born. They were made when a moment left no other choice. The hunters were not. Gone. The first wave had retreated, but outside the farmhouse the field still glowed with their cold lights. He could hear them regrouping, their strange voices rising like metallic echoes in the night. Lyra crouched beside him, her hands glowing as she pressed against his bleeding side. "You cannot fight more," she whispered, desperate. "Your body is broken, please, we must run." Eli gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright. "Run where? They'll chase you. They'll never stop." Her eyes shone with sorrow. Then you will die for nothing. He shook his head. His vision blurred, but his voice came steady. Not for nothing. For you. The front of the farmhouse cracked again, light searing through the walls. More figures poured in, taller than before, moving with deadly precision. Their weapons hummed, ready to finish what they had started. Eli stumbled to his feet, grabbing the shotgun though it held. No shells. He stood in the center of the ruined kitchen, blood staining his shirt, smoke curling around him. He knew he couldn't win. He knew he was only one man against an army. But he also knew something they didn't. Humans had always stood their ground, against storms, against war, against the weight of life itself. And he was no different. You want her? Eli shouted, his voice raw and defiant. You'll have to go through me first. The hunters advanced. The first blast of their weapons scorched the wall where he stood. Eli dove aside, grabbing an iron pan from the counter and hurling it with all his strength. It smashed into one figure's head, cracking its glowing visor. Sparks burst out, the creature stumbling back. Another lunged forward, and Eli swung the shotgun like a club, smashing its chest. The impact sent pain shooting through his arm, but the creature reeled. He fought with everything he had, not with skill, but with fury, with the stubborn fire of a man who refused to surrender. The farmhouse became a battlefield. Energy blasts ripped through wooden beams, sending debris flying. Eli ducked, swung, shoved, each motion slower than the last but fueled by something deeper than strength. Behind him, Elira stood, her hands raised. Light flared around her, brighter than before. Her voice rang out in words Eli didn't understand, a song of power that made the air tremble. A barrier of shimmering water rose between them and the attackers, absorbing some of the blasts, but it cost her. He saw her knees buckle, her glow flicker. She couldn't hold it for long. Eli pushed forward again, striking, roaring, refusing to fall. At last, the hunters faltered. They hadn't expected this resistance, not from a single human with no weapon left. Their lines broke. A sound passed among them, strange, sharp, like a signal. Slowly, one by one, they began to retreat, fading back into the night, their lights dimming across the fields. Eli collapsed to his knees, every muscle screaming. Blood dripped from his side, his vision swimming. He heard Elira cry out his name, felt her arms catch him before he hit the floor. Why? She whispered, tears streaking her glowing cheeks. Why fight so hard? You could have lived if you gave me away. Eli forced his eyes open, meeting hers. His voice was faint, but steady. Because you asked me not to kill you, and I promised. A man keeps his word. Her lips trembled, her glow flickering like a candle in the wind. She pressed her hands against his wound, pouring all the light she had left into him. Stay, she begged. Please stay. You are more than promise. You are hope. The farmhouse was in ruins. Smoke rose from broken beams, holes burned through the walls. But the attackers were gone. For now. Elira knelt in the wreckage, holding Eli close, her tears falling onto his bloodied shirt. Eli closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. Yet in his chest, under the pain, he felt something fierce. He had stood his ground. He had not let fear decide. And though his body trembled on the edge of darkness, his heart was steady. Because for the first time in years, he had found something worth fighting for. Morning came slowly, like the sky itself hesitated to rise over the wreck of the farmhouse. The fields were quiet now. No humming lights, no shadows moving through the corn. Only smoke drifting from broken beams and the soft cries of birds returning after the chaos of the night. Eli Turner woke with pain running through every inch of his body. His side burned where the wound had been, but the bleeding had stopped. He realized he was still alive only because of her. Elira sat beside him on the ruined floor, her head resting against the wall, her eyes half closed with exhaustion. Her glow was dim, faint like the last embers of a dying fire. She had spent everything she had to keep him breathing. When Eli stirred, she lifted her head, and her lips curved into the smallest, tired smile. "You stay?" she whispered. Eli tried to sit up, groaning with effort. "I told you I would." Her hand reached for his, trembling, fragile. He felt the warmth of her touch, different from human skin, but soft all the same. The house was broken. Windows shattered, walls burned, furniture torn apart. It no longer felt like a home, but a battlefield. And yet for Eli, something had changed. The emptiness that had haunted him for years was gone. In its place was the strange, fragile bond between him and the being who had fallen into his life. Elira's eyes filled with sorrow as she looked around at the damage. "They will come again," she said softly. "Stronger. They will not stop." Eli nodded slowly. He knew she was right. The hunters had retreated, not surrendered. They would return, and next time, maybe he wouldn't survive. But when he looked at her tired face, her trembling hands, her eyes that carried both fear and hope, he felt something stir in him stronger than dread. "Then we'll be ready," he said simply. By midday, he carried a tray of food down the hall. He wasn't sure what she could eat, so he placed simple things: bread, eggs, a jug of water. He tapped lightly on the door. "It's me," he said, his voice awkward. "I brought something." Silence. Then after a long pause, a soft reply. "Leave it." Eli hesitated, then set the tray on the floor and stepped back. The door creaked open a crack, and he caught a glimpse of her. Wet hair falling around her face. One glowing hand darting, out to grab the jug of water first, almost desperately. Then the door shut again. He stood there for a moment, staring at the wood before finally turning away. That night, he heard her moving. Not just the splash of water this time, but footsteps, light and careful, across the floor. Eli stayed at the kitchen table, pretending not to notice. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her standing in the doorway, wrapped in his blanket like a cloak. For the first time, he saw her properly in the light. Her skin wasn't silver anymore. It was pale, soft, almost human, though faint traces of color still shimmered under the surface like veins of light moving with her heartbeat. Strange symbols ran across her arms, faint scars or markings that glowed when she shifted. Her hair, long and dark, dripped water onto the blanket. She stood uncertain, eyes flicking from the door to him, ready to run. Eli didn't move. He only pushed the plate of bread across the table. "Hungry?" Elira's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but after a moment she stepped closer. Each motion was careful, as though expecting a trap. She sat on the very edge of the chair, clutching the blanket, and reached for the bread. She sniffed it first. Then, slowly, she took a bite. Eli watched her chew, her expression unreadable. Finally, she swallowed, then whispered, "It is good." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well, that's something." For a long time, they sat in silence. Eli wasn't sure how to speak to someone who wasn't human, who had fallen from the sky. But after a while, curiosity tugged at him. "Those markings on your arms," he asked carefully. "What are they?" Elira looked down, pulling the blanket tighter around her. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she whispered, "Chains. Wounds that do not fade. My people mark what they claim." Her voice cracked. Eli frowned, his chest tightening. "They hurt you?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to his, glowing faintly, wide with something between fear and shame. She didn't answer, but the silence said enough. Eli leaned back, his hands curling on the table. He felt anger rise in him, hot and sharp, though he had no idea who that anger was for. Whoever her people were, whatever they had done, it had left her running, bleeding, hiding in the house of a lonely farmer. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Elira blinked at him, confused. "Sorry? For what they did? For what you've been through?" Her mouth parted, and for a moment she seemed on the edge of speaking, but instead she looked down, clutching the bread in her hands. He saw her shoulders shake faintly, as though holding back a storm of feelings. The hours passed, and slowly, little by little, Elira's fear began to ease. She asked questions in broken English, pointing at objects in the kitchen. "What is this?" she'd ask, tapping his old radio. "What is name?" She repeated the words carefully, storing them away. In return, she whispered some of her own. He couldn't pronounce them well, but she smiled, faintly, almost shy when he tried. When the night deepened and the farmhouse grew quiet again, Eli fetched a spare pillow and blanket, setting them on the couch. "You can sleep here tonight?" he told her. Elira looked at him long and hard, searching for some hidden cruelty. When she found none, she nodded slowly, lowering herself onto the couch, wrapping in the blanket. Her glow dimmed as her eyes fluttered shut. Eli stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. For years, his house had been empty, filled only with silence. Now, for the first time, it carried the sound of another heartbeat. And strangely, he realized, he didn't feel so alone anymore. The days began to stretch into something Eli never expected. What had started as fear and confusion slowly turned into a rhythm, fragile but real. The farmhouse was no longer silent. There were footsteps besides his own, soft and careful at first, but gradually growing more confident. Elira stayed mostly inside. The world outside frightened her. The open sky, the wide fields. She kept glancing up as though something would swoop down from the clouds. But inside the house, she began to move without flinching at every sound. Eli noticed the change, first at breakfast. She sat at the table without clutching the blanket like armor. Her hands, though still trembling, reached more easily for the bread. She even tried the scrambled eggs he made, wrinkling her nose at the taste before giving him a small, almost teasing look. "Not very good," she said in her broken English. Eli chuckled for the first time in years. "I never claimed to be a cook." It startled him, that laugh. It felt strange in his chest, rusty like an old door opening after too long. Elira tilted her head, as though the sound itself was something new and curious. She healed slowly. Eli saw it in the way her skin grew brighter, the way the strange scars dimmed, the way her shoulders no longer hunched like a hunted animal. She still drank water constantly, whole pitchers at a time, but her strength returned. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't watching, she traced the markings on her arms with her fingertips. There was a sorrow in her face then, heavy and private. Eli didn't ask. He had learned the value of silence, of waiting for someone to speak when they were ready. At night, when the air outside grew cool, he sat on the porch while Elira lingered by the doorway, wrapped in his blanket. They said little, but sometimes she asked questions. "Why you live here?" "Alone?" Eli stared out at the cornfields. "Because I didn't know how to live with anyone else anymore." She frowned. "Your people left you?" He shook his head. "No, I left them. Some things happened. Long ago. Easier to be alone." She studied him for a long time with those glowing eyes that seemed to cut deeper than words. Then she said softly, "Alone is heavy." Eli nodded. He didn't need to answer. As the days passed, Elira showed him things too. Small things like how she could make the water in her glass ripple with just a touch, or how she could speak words in her language that made the air hum faintly. She told him the stars he saw at night had names older than Earth itself. When she whispered them, her voice turned soft, reverent, as though each name carried a memory. One evening, Eli brought out his old telescope, dusty from the attic. He set it up in the yard and Elira leaned over it, her face lighting up as she looked through the lens. "There," she said, pointing upward. "Not star, home, long ago." Eli followed her finger but saw only a faint dot among millions. To him it was nothing. To her it was everything. "You miss it?" he asked quietly. Elira's expression dimmed, her hand falling to her lap. "It was never home. Only cage." The words struck him hard. He wanted to ask more, but the look in her eyes stopped him. Instead, He simply sat beside her in the grass, the night stretching around them. Trust grew slowly, but it grew. Elira no longer asked "don't kill me" every time he entered a room. She no longer recoiled when his hand passed too close. One afternoon she even laughed, truly laughed, when he burned the toast so badly the smoke alarm screamed. The sound of her laughter filled the house like sunlight breaking through old dust. Eli found himself smiling more often. He found himself listening for her footsteps, waiting for her voice. For so many years he had lived in silence, convinced the world had nothing left to give him. But here in his old farmhouse, with a runaway alien curled under his blanket, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. That night, as he checked the locks before bed, Elira stood by the window, gazing at the stars. She turned when he entered, her eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "You protect me?" she whispered, almost like a question. Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I will." She studied him for a moment longer, then gave the smallest smile. "Then maybe I can protect you too." Eli didn't understand what she meant, but as the farmhouse settled into quiet once again, he realized something. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt shared, and in that fragile bond, something stronger than fear was beginning to take root. The peace did not last. For weeks, the farmhouse had become a fragile sanctuary. Elira was healing, learning, even smiling sometimes. Eli had almost begun to believe she could stay hidden forever, that the world would forget about her. But in his heart, he knew it was only a matter of time. The first sign came one evening when he stepped out to the porch. The sun was sinking, painting the fields in gold. For a moment, everything looked calm. Then he saw it. Strange lights in the sky, moving in ways no airplane ever could. They glowed like search beams, sweeping the horizon, drawing closer. Eli's stomach dropped. He went inside quickly. Elira was sitting at the table, tracing words in his notebook with her delicate fingers. She looked up, reading his face instantly. "What is wrong?" "They're here," Eli said, voice low. "Whoever's been hunting you." Her glow dimmed, fear spreading across her features. She stood, backing away from the window, as if the very sky might crash down on her. "No. Too soon. I thought. More time." Eli grabbed his shotgun from the corner. His hand shook, but not from weakness. From the weight of the choice he knew was coming. Eli Turner had grown used to silence. His old farmhouse, sitting alone at the edge of the cornfields, carried nothing but the sound of ticking clocks and the rustle of wind in the grass. For years, that silence had been both his comfort and his curse. He told himself he liked the peace, the distance from people, the way nobody came knocking on his door anymore. But on some nights, when the sky stretched too dark and the stars looked like cold eyes staring down, he admitted the truth. He was lonely. It was on one of those nights when a storm rolled in heavy and wild that the silence broke. Thunder rattled the windows. Rain hammered on the tin roof like 1,000 fists. Eli was sitting at the kitchen table with his old coffee cup, staring at the wall, when he heard something strange. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Water. At first he thought it was just the pipes, old and groaning under the strain of the rain, but the sound was steady, too steady, like a faucet running, and it was coming from his bathroom. Eli frowned. He hadn't turned anything on. He hadn't even been in that room all day. Setting down his cup, he stood slowly, every bone in his body stiff with the ache of middle age. The farmhouse was dark except for the faint light of the storm outside. He walked down the hall, each step creaking on the wooden floorboards. The closer he got, the clearer the sound became. Running water, splashing, movement. His first thought was that an animal had gotten in, maybe a raccoon or something bigger. He reached for the iron poker leaning by the wall, the one he used for the fireplace, and tightened his grip. His heart beat louder than the rain now. He pushed open the bathroom door and froze. It was not an animal. It was not anything he had ever seen before. Someone, something, was sitting in his bathtub. At first glance, she looked almost human. A woman, young, with long, wet hair clinging to her shoulders. But her skin shimmered faintly, glowing in the dim light like liquid silver, rippling across her arms. The colors shifted softly, green to violet, violet to blue, as though her very flesh held the light of the stars. Her eyes lifted to meet his, wide and glowing faintly like embers in the dark. Eli's throat locked. His brain screamed at him to run, to get out, to slam the door and call someone, anyone. But his legs would not move. The woman gasped. Her whole body shrank back into the water, her arms wrapping tight around herself. The fear in her face was so raw, so naked, that it struck him harder than the storm outside. Her lips parted, trembling. The words came out broken, soft but clear. "Don't kill me." Eli blinked, stunned. Her voice was musical but cracked with desperation, like glass about to shatter. She was terrified of him. I won't," he managed, his own voice, rough from disuse. His hand loosened around the iron poker, though he did not drop it. Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" The woman shook her head, droplets of water sliding down her strange, glowing skin. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts, like a bird trapped in a cage. "I ran," she whispered. "They will come. I just needed water. Please." Her words made little sense to him, but her fear did. He saw it in the way her shoulders curled, in the way her hands gripped the porcelain edges of the tub as though she might sink and vanish. It wasn't the fear of a predator caught in the light. It was the fear of prey, beaten, hunted, with nowhere left to go. For a long moment, Eli simply stood there, the storm thundering around the house, the bathroom lit by flashes of lightning. His life had been built on silence, on walls that kept the world away. But now in his bathtub, trembling and begging him for mercy, sat something that wasn't supposed to exist. And he couldn't bring himself to drive her out. He didn't understand who she was. He didn't understand why she had come. But he understood fear. He remembered it from his childhood when his little sister had once hidden under the bed as their father raged in the kitchen. The same helpless pleading had been in her eyes then. Eli swallowed hard and slowly, deliberately. He set the iron poker against the wall. He stepped back, showing empty hands. "It's all right," he said softly, though his own voice trembled. "I'm not going to hurt you." The storm howled outside. The farmhouse groaned. And in that small bathroom under the flickering light, the impossible stared back at him with tear-bright eyes. Eli Turner had lived alone for years. But tonight, he was not alone. Eli did not sleep that night. He left the woman. No, the creature, though she looked so human, inside the bathroom. He gave her a blanket, set it on the floor near the tub, and stepped away without pushing her. She had pressed herself against the far corner of the porcelain, as if expecting him to strike. The image burned in his mind long after he closed the door. He sat in the kitchen instead, the shotgun laid across his lap. His coffee grew cold as the storm raged on. Every few minutes, he thought he heard a soft movement down the hall, a splash of water or a muffled breath. His hand would tighten around the gun, then relax again. He couldn't shake her words. "Don't kill me." Why would she beg that unless she had reason? Who was she running from? And why here, his old farmhouse, his bathroom of all places? The storm began to fade in the early hours. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the thunder rumbled far away. But Eli's thoughts only grew louder. He told himself this wasn't real. He was too old, too tired. Maybe the loneliness had finally snapped something in his head. Maybe he was imagining her. But no, he had seen the fear in her eyes. Madness couldn't invent something that real. When dawn came, pale light spilled. Through the curtains, Eli stood, stretched his aching back, and walked slowly toward the bathroom. The hallway smelled faintly of something sweet, like flowers after rain. His hand hesitated on the doorknob before he pushed it open. She was still there. The tub was filled almost to the brim now, the water glimmering faintly as if it carried its own light. The blanket lay untouched on the floor. She was curled inside the water, knees to her chest, her glowing skin dim in the morning. When the door creaked, her head jerked up and her eyes widened in fresh panic. "Please," she whispered again, voice weak. "Don't hurt me." Eli raised his hands, palms open, the way a man might calm a frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly. "I told you that." She blinked, uncertain, her breathing fast. He could see her trembling under the water, though. She tried to hide it. "Who are you?" he asked, gentler this time. "What happened to you?" For a long moment she only stared at him as though weighing whether his words could be trusted. Then, with a shaking breath, she spoke. "My name is Elira," she said, her accent soft and strange. "I came from the sky, my ship, broken, my people, hunting me." The words came haltingly, like each one cost her strength. Eli frowned. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but her voice cracked, and she pressed her hands to her face as if the memories themselves were too heavy. "I needed water," she murmured. "Always water. I can't heal without it. I thought I would die." Eli stood there, torn between disbelief and pity. A part of him still wanted to laugh it off, call himself crazy, but the pain in her voice was real. She wasn't a dream. She wasn't a trick. She was someone afraid of being destroyed, someone who had stumbled into his life by chance, and she had begged him not to kill her. Eli's chest tightened. He remembered being a boy, standing in the hallway while his father shouted and his sister cried, small and helpless. He remembered the feeling of wanting to protect her but being too weak. That same feeling burned in him now. Slowly, Eli crouched down by the doorway, lowering himself so he didn't tower over her. His knees cracked, and he winced, but he stayed there, level with her eyes. "I won't hand you over," he said quietly. "I don't even know who's after you, but you're safe here. Do you hear me? As long as you're in this house, no one's going to hurt you." For a moment, silence. Then something small changed in her eyes. The terror eased, just a fraction. She looked at him as if testing his promise, as if waiting for the hidden cruelty to appear. But he stayed still, calm, steady. Elira's shoulders loosened. She let out a shaky breath, almost like a sob, and lowered her hands. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why help me?" Eli didn't have an answer ready. He only shook his head. "Because you needed it." Her lips parted, and she stared at him as though those words were foreign, impossible. Slowly, her trembling eased. Eli stood again, backing toward the door. "Rest. I'll bring you something to eat later if you can." "Eat." He left the sentence unfinished, unsure. He closed the door gently, leaning against it for a moment. His heart thudded heavy in his chest. The farmhouse no longer felt empty. The silence he had known for years was broken, and deep down, Eli knew it would never be the same again. The next day passed like a dream Eli couldn't wake from. The storm had gone, leaving the fields wet and shining, but inside the farmhouse, the air felt heavy with something he could not name. He had a stranger under his roof, a stranger who glowed faintly, whose eyes seemed carved from starlight, whose very presence bent the silence of his home into something alive. All morning, Eli worked through his chores, feeding the chickens, checking the fences, walking the muddy rows of corn. But his mind was never outside. It stayed in the house behind the closed bathroom door, circling back to the image of her curled in the tub, clutching herself like a wounded bird,